Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the last webinar of the year. This is our sixth and final webinar, the Positioning Conversation. I appreciate all of you who are here promptly and on time, so I'm going to start in your honor. And I'm going to start with a story because I've had some great stories this week, and I'll probably share some more during the webinar. But one of them is very relevant to this conversation today, and that is, I was talking with a client earlier this week, and they told me about a success story. They just won a wonderful project, and they've been working hard on their selling skills and, selling value propositions, selling value, intellectual property, capturing the added value that is their worth that's above and beyond their transactional value. And it's a great story. They have an opportunity in the, I'll use numbers for a relative reason, not the numbers of their example, but the client is an event production project, and the client, after all the conversations and all the players that they're talking to, they mentioned 5 or 6 fairly big players that were competing on this, and I think my client was probably the smallest on the bid list. And the end client said, "Yeah, well, here's what we're looking for, and we've got a $300,000 to $350,000 budget." Okay, great. So my client goes back and works on their ideation, and they figure out what they're going to pitch for this client, and they factor everything in. They weave it all into their proposal and presentation, and came back with a budget that was $450,000, $100,000, 25% more than what the client said was their high end. It was a daring move, especially considering the playing field. And the client loved their approach and their solution so much that they went back, they found the extra budget, and their only response was, "Where do we sign?" It wasn't, "Let's negotiate, let's find something better, that's not our budget." It's, "No, we have the money, where do we sign?" And that is the kind of success story that we would all love to have, and it's there. It's out there if we will start using some braver selling techniques. And most of it just comes from better listening. So here's a great example of one of the folks that I work with that are using these techniques. They listened better, and they got fantastic results. And I honestly can tell you that's not the first time it's happened, but every time it happens, it reinforces all the efforts that they're going through. So very, very, very proud of them. All right, let's get going here. So reminders, we're on the Zoom interface here. If you've got any questions, post them anytime. I'm going to try and capture questions live as you do them. Sometimes I'm able to do that. Sometimes I may wait and answer them a little bit later in the program, but I'm always going to be aware of them. So go ahead and put them in anytime that you want. The sessions are being recorded. I hit record. Yay, my technical job is over. And it'll be on avmatters.com by Monday, which means probably by tomorrow morning, because it doesn't take that long anymore. And the handout, the slides that you're seeing on the screen, will be available with the recording. So you can, we had a great registration for this one, but being the holidays, I'm not surprised that the number of viewers here is a little bit less than normal. I think we had over 150 registrations, and there's probably only about a third of you on the call right now, rather than our usual 50 to 60%, and that's the holiday. So I'm glad everybody's taking some holiday time, and I'm glad you're interested in this subject. So before I go any further, I got to thank our sponsors, because AV Matters sponsors this. And like I said, this is our 6th webinar of the year. I do these things for free, except that somebody else is helping defray the expenses, and these are the folks that are on your screen right now. So Nationwide, Digital Projection, AV Stummful, Merck's Crew, IntelliEvent, DWP Rents, Complete Crewing, Lasso, Drape Kings, and then we welcome Flex back to the sponsor fold for 2017. So these guys care that you have access to business advice and information, and it makes it a lot easier for me to continue to do this sort of thing for you. So thank you, all of our sponsors. So, hey, yeah, that's me. That's still me. I'm Tom Stimson, president of the Stimson Group. If you're new to me in the webinars, I'm a business advisor. I'm a business consultant. Helping people is what I do. I'd look forward to meeting you sometime in the future. All right, let's get on to this. There are 3 steps to selling. I've done this webinar before that talks about qualify, position, and close. And I'm going to remind you where to go find that again. But these are the 3 steps. And today we're going to talk about the position step. And we're going to break it down into its steps. So the steps within the steps. There we go. If you go to my website, or you can find this on avmatters.com, there's a webinar called Managing Requests for Proposals, Managing RFPs, which talks about the 3 steps in the process. And we are primarily going to focus today on responding to RFPs, which is a little bit different, but not completely different from just developing a client in general. So most of us develop new business based on a project and not based on the potential of a project. So we're going to put our energy there. All right, before we get started, you'll go any further, there's a lot of things that we need to agree on. There's some baseline understanding we have to have. I believe that profit is more important than revenue, and that clients are more important than individual jobs. And you will hear this as I talk about things. If you're focusing on getting one job and you're not focusing on the 3rd job from now or the 4th job from now, we're not going to get a client. We're just going to get a customer. Okay? If you are using your resources to bid on jobs that you cannot win, you are wasting time and money. And you're also expending your value proposition. In other words, you're devaluing what you will represent in the marketplace by bidding on jobs that you cannot win. Now, that's not to say that we won't do this sometimes, but we have to do it strategically. And buyers that don't take the time to get to know you aren't going to hire you except on price. And if they're shopping on price, they're probably not going to clear your qualification process. And what we're going to talk about today in terms of positioning are qualified customers who are going to take the time to know you. This is what's important. This is what's valuable to us. And then my last prejudice in all of this is that service companies must sell value that is greater than the sum of its parts. If what you're selling at is your cost plus margin, and you're comparing yourself to the marketplace, and you are not more valuable than the people around you, okay, then you are not selling service. You're selling replacement. So part of what we have got to do as a service industry is do a much better job of selling our value and not just a list of line items with a margin on it. So here's some statistical realities. Now, the first statistic I'm making up to 80% of the qualification process is complete before a B2B buyer contacts you. In other words, if somebody picks up the phone or emails you and says, hey, we have this RFP, we'd like to talk to you about this project, they've already decided. 80% of the decision about whether or not you're qualified has already been made. In other words, they're not going to waste their time contacting somebody who they don't believe is qualified. So you don't have to qualify yourself to them as much as you need to qualify them as a buyer, because they've already done their due diligence. Now you need to do yours. This next statistic is actually a real statistic, which I've cited in other webinars, is that 7% of the buying decision is made before a B2B buyer even contacts you. So if someone has decided that you are qualified and contacts you, there's a 57% chance they've already decided who they're going to use. And it might be you, and it might be someone else. And your experience may vary. Your value in the marketplace may affect this number. This is a blended number for all B2B buyers in all industries. So your results may vary. So if you're well placed in the market, a higher percentage of the buying decision may have been made before somebody actually contacts you. Now, to the first point, before you try to change anybody's mind about whether or not they should buy from you, determine if they're qualified on your terms. Another thing that comes up in probably every webinar and every conversation I'm having with salespeople and sales and marketing folks is the bow tie effect. So I thought I would bring it back here and review it with you real quickly to make sure that we understand what it is and reinforce that. The bow tie effect is actually not a good thing. Okay? It's something that we're trying to get past. the traditional, and this is me on my soapbox, the traditional relationship selling, and I'm making air quotes with my fingers right now, relationship selling is the manifestation of the bow tie effect that says that there's a one-to-one relationship between the buyer and the seller. And that relationship is what determines whether or not they'll do business with us. In other words, your business's gatekeeper, your salesperson, is talking to the client's gatekeeper, their buyer, and that's where the relationship lives. This is horrible. This is awful. We don't want this. This is a stepping stone to something that's much more valuable and much more important. So the job of the persons with the relationship is to actually turn the bow tie around and create the diamond. And what we want is a B2B relationship with our customers. It is not 1990 anymore. It's not even 2000. Okay? We're having B2B relationships. I want my people talking to your people. I want my bookkeeper talking to their bookkeeper. I want my logistics person talking to their logistics person. I want my creative people talking to their creative people. There is more than one person in your client that you need to interact with. You know, there's facilities people. There's all sorts of folks that you have to interact with. The sooner we bring those people together, the more interactions that we have between human beings, the much harder it is to break apart a diamond. Bow ties are easy. You can unravel a bow tie in one conversation. And we see it happen all the time. And you'll never know it happened because the salesman's not going to tell you. The customer or the opportunity is just going to disappear. So we want this bow tie effect to turn into a diamond effect. And the role of the individual starts off as a business development role, and then they take on a sales role. And in your organization, that might be two different people. You might have a business development person who hands off, creates the diamond opportunity, then steps away, and someone else moves into the account management role. Or your account manager may start out as a business development person and then become the salesperson. So the bow tie effect is bad because it throttles the B2B relationship. The goal is to create a diamond. Business development starts the conversion process before an RFP is ever in play. As soon as an RFP comes into play, it triggers the need to actually follow through with the conversion process and develop the sales relationship where we put the two organizations together to get to the outcome. This is what allows positioning, which is what we're going to talk about today, to happen. The customer experience life cycle needs to be explained here. We're going to focus a lot today on the sales process, and within the sales process is qualify, position, and close. But there's a marketing life cycle, there's a business development life cycle that drives us into sales, which drives us into delivery, which drives us into the business process, which might be simply accounting. It's the transacting part of it. It's the business. It's just business, folks. And when we're done with that, the marketing cycle takes back over again because we don't want to let these customers go fallow in between projects. So if I was going to do, and this is what I'm looking at for 2017, is doing this complete customer experience life cycle in a series of webinars so that we can close the loop on this. But right now we're going to talk about the sales. So the sales process is qualify. We want a qualified yes, okay, or an unemotional no. That makes sense? We're going to move into a positioning phase that we're going to talk about today, which is how to take that qualified yes and turn it into a profitable yes, or an optimistic not yet. In other words, hey, we know how we should work together in the future. We may not work together on this project, or we may not have a project yet, but we are going to work together sometime in the future. And then closing becomes a very, very simple process, which is a mutual go, rather than us begging and waiting for the customer to say go. All right, I'll stop here for a quick question. The question is it reasonable to think that most relationships start as bow tie and then develop to diamond? And yes, absolutely. Absolutely, that's how most of them are going to start. And there's an exception to this, though, which will prove the rule. Millennials. Millennials tend to start as a diamond. And I've had lots of stories lately of my clients selling into millennial buyer groups where they can't even tell who the point person is. They're dealing with a group of 5, 6, or 7 people. And millennials tend to want to approach things from a diamond. They start at diamond. They don't see, the purpose of a bow tie. But for most of us, particularly those of us who've been around for too long, we're from a bow tie world. And the whole idea of getting beyond the bow tie is a fairly new concept. It's certainly something I've been talking about for several years. Other people talk about it as well. Thanks for the question. So, quick recap on what qualifying is all about. Qualifying answers the questions, and these are the things that we want the client to be able to tell us, or we're going to discern through listening, is why us? Why is this an RFP? Are we a good fit? Is this a suitable contact for this project? Do we have mutual credibility between two sides of the bow tie? Is the job even winnable, and will we have an opportunity to negotiate? Now, these are not questions that you ask the person in front of you or on the phone. Please. These are things that you have to discern through open-ended questions and very good listening. And I have sat next to salespeople who have said, and one of them I remember vividly asking the other person, say, are you the actual decision maker, or is there somebody else I should be talking to? It's like, yeah, I told you to find out who the decision maker is. I didn't tell you to do it by insulting and being condescending to the other person. A better way, and if you'll watch the webinar Language of Outcomes, we explore some of these things. You ask questions like that in terms of who besides you will be involved in the decision-making process. And that's a nice way of saying, is there anybody else? Without insulting the person and saying that they're not involved in the decision-making process. So we have to qualify. You get through your qualification process. You may adjust your qualifications for your business based on some other criteria. Could be the size of a job, could be the market that you're trying to get to. There are other targets you may want to weave in that. But basically, this is what I'm looking for. Now, finally, let's talk about positioning. We've qualified the customer. Positioning is the process of engaging the buyer's intellect to uncover their needs and affirm your credibility at the same time. It very much requires the diamond. You need to involve the people from both sides that make up the intellect of the opportunity. In other words, you can't have a one-to-one relationship and do effective positioning. Now, the exception to that is that there are a small number of really good sales folks out there who can have a pretty strong positioning conversation all on their own. And people in my position, people like me who are solo entrepreneurs, have to do it all the time. And I will tell you, it's challenging. I'm good at it, but it is really challenging. Sometimes I wish I had 3 other people I could bring to a meeting with me to help sell me. But in your business, you need multiple people. You will run into buyers who insist that they're the only person that needs to come to that meeting. What that tells you is that you don't have credibility and that you are not ready for positioning. And in fact, positioning should help you build that credibility, so maybe you need to change what it is you're inviting the customer to, and we'll talk about invitations more in a minute. You may have to build some more credibility in order to get this positioning conversation. So here are the steps to positioning. It starts with an invitation that I just alluded to, and we'll go over each one of these in a little bit more detail. Then we have the positioning conversation, which is the meat of this whole thing. You take the results of that conversation and you go have an ideation session. In other words, you brainstorm a solution. There's a great exercise that we did at Infocom Avec, for those of you that were there, on ideation, and I've incorporated a version of that into the Jumpstart workshop that we did last week. And more of my clients are going to be seeing this. As a matter of fact, we will do a webinar on ideation and the right way to do that. We take the results of ideation and we develop the pitch to the client. And this is a conversation. This you call it a dog and pony show, you call it a pitch. It can be in person, it can be electronic. There's different ways to do it, but we're going to have a conversation that will then lead to an agreement in principle. So if we've done our pitch and we're having the conversation with the client about what they like and they don't like, and oh, by the way, your pitch is going to be spot on because you've already had the positioning conversation. Your pitch is going to knock it out of the park or better because you've done the right listing to begin with. You'll come to an agreement in principle. You will present that or rephrase that back, mirror that back to the customer. You will put together the basics of a proposal, get some feedback from the client to make sure you're on the right track before you actually present the real proposal. And by the time you've presented a proposal, you're really hopefully only presenting an agreement, because you have the agreement in principle, you have the feedback, you've taken all the noise out of the proposal. Now it's simply a document to confirm, which is why the closing process is so much simpler. So these are the steps that we're going to talk about. So let's start with the invitation, okay? You want to invite somebody to a mutually beneficial conversation. This is how we start the engagement of the diamond. And you have to provide unique and relevant value to get this conversation going. It might sound something like this after you've talked with somebody for a little while, realize that you're philosophically in sync. They've done a good job of qualifying you. You've qualified them. And you have a conversation that goes something like this. I say, well, Bob, I think we're at the point now where the only thing that's left to do is to have more of your people meet more of my people. So here's what I'm going to propose. I propose that I bring my creative director, my technical director, the owner of the company, and some representatives of my project and sales teams, and we sit down with you and talk about your project and your needs. Who would you bring to that meeting to make sure that it's the best use of everybody's time? If you've done a good job of qualifying, and the client's done a good job of qualifying, and you are providing something valuable to the customer in terms of the project or the opportunities that you're talking about, why wouldn't they take this step? And I know what everybody on this phone call does for a living, and most of you are involved in project sales of one form or another, and you are doing something that's extremely valuable for your customers. So why wouldn't they want to take this extra step and complete the due diligence on you? So the invitee has to see the potential benefit, and the access to your experts is very, very important. And they also have to see a history of you bringing innovation into the conversation. And they need to know that there is more innovation to be had if we start talking company to company instead of salesperson to gatekeeper. Now, you may want to leverage a unique resource that's relevant to the customer needs. And since most people on this call here are technology people, why not leverage technology? Why not say, hey, you know what? We do have, a mock command and control center set up in our office where you can see how some of the things that we've talked about will work and what some of the options are. So we can take you through some of those things and give you the user experience. Would that be valuable to you? Who else in your organization would benefit from understanding what the opportunity is for a better user experience? And can we get them there? Can we get some users to this meeting? Okay, this is creating value in the invitation. All right, I'm going to pause here for a quick question. It says, how do you handle outside vendors in the initial meeting? In other words, we're an audio-centric company who will outsource video, lighting, etc. All right, I get the question. Sometimes we're not all the things that a project needs. It makes sense to bring strategic partners in. However, you don't necessarily have to bring the suppliers in unless they're very trusted strategic suppliers who will work with you and do this on spec. You might bring in an individual who represents the disciplines that you don't have inside your organization, and there's nothing that says you can't represent them as you. You're what, call them a freelancer, call them a consultant. you can represent them as part of your organization if they're under some sort of a contract. So there's two ways to go about this. Bring a representative in for those disciplines, or go ahead and bring the strategic partners in and present them as such and say, we're going to be the lead contractor on this. We are going to work together as strategic partners to give you the best result. And the reason this is an advantage to you is then you have to explain why this is an advantage. Okay? Now, I can tell you that it indeed is an advantage. Okay? It indeed is an advantage to sometimes have strategic partners because you have the best of audio, the best of video, the best of control, the best of display, rather than a blended company which is trying to be the best at all things. That's how I would position that. So, great question. Great question. All right. Now, in this conversation, we're going to cover three things. We understand what the why is, what the what is, and what the how is. Why is about goals. We need to understand what is the end game for the client. If we do this project, what does it mean for you 5 years from now or 5 weeks from now? What is about outcomes? What's the end result to the solution? What's the feeling that you get? Who benefits from it? So there's a difference between strategic goals and tactical outcomes. How is about methodologies, and we talk about that absolutely last if we have to talk about it at all. What I see in most of you is you start with methodologies because you think that's why the customer came to you. Yes, we'd like a video wall. Well, guess what? There's 5,000 companies in North America who can talk about video walls. So why is talking about how you would put a video wall important? Let's talk about why they think a video wall is a solution, how they would benefit from having a video wall. Is there a better solution than a video wall? And then once we agree on all of that, then we can talk about methodologies. So some questions in the whys, okay? A good why question to help discern what goals might be. And remember, you learn these things by listening. You ask a question and then you shut up. And you know who I'm talking to. There's that guy in your company who can't stop talking, and he talks over the client because he thinks that's what is going to get you the business. No, ask the question and be quiet. Why this project? Why now? That's a strategic question. Sit quietly and patiently until the answer comes out. And then let them develop the answer by not responding to it. And the technique that we use for this, and we talk about this in, I think, Language of Outcomes, is the one-word response. They say, well, we're very interested in advancing strategic goals and moving into some other segments, and we think having this command center will help our customers better understand what our value is. And you nod and say, value. Yeah, our value in terms of, we have a lot of competition, and they go on and they keep talking. And every time they finish something, just respond with one word and see what else comes out of them. Some other goal questions. Why is a new supplier the best solution for you right now? In other words, justify for me why you would introduce all this turmoil into your organization if you've been working with somebody else for all these years. And question the validity of actually the need. Question their need. What would happen if you didn't do this? These are valid questions. They're high-level questions. And another reason we want to have a diamond conversation is because for most of us, a salesman asking this question of a director or a president or a CFO would be impertinent. And the reason we want to get our owner in on this meeting, at least for the first 15 minutes, is so that we have somebody who's in a position to ask this question credibly. And it's not to say that some of our salespeople are not extremely credible folks, and that we don't have some very talented high-level account executives that can have C-level conversations. But it's safer to make sure that we have somebody who absolutely is qualified by title and position. So, and the last question here, what do you hope to achieve with this initiative over the next 5 years? Ask 80,000-foot questions. Okay? get some understanding of the goals. You don't ask the entire list of questions. If you have to ask more than 2 questions, you probably are dealing with somebody who doesn't know the answers or finds the whole conversation really unimportant and boring, in which case they're interested in talking about something else. And perhaps it's the what. So what questions are about the outcome? Okay? You ask things like, what determines whether a project is a success and what would make it even better? You know, when you've done this event in the past, what told you it was successful and what would have made it more successful? If this installation does what you need, how is that going to help your business? What does that look like? And then shut up. Talk about their audience, talk about their users. What influences your users most effectively? What do they respond to? What are their frustrations and concerns about the way that you're doing it now? Okay, these are outcome-based questions that gives you some clues about, if you're successful, what is the benefit to the customer? If we do this right, here are the outcomes you should hope to expect. Which leads us to our favorite talking point, which is the how. And we want to talk about how we're going to do it. Well, we have the best project management system, and we do these things, and look at the software we use to make sure that we're accurate at how we do everything. These are how things. Let's take our how up a little bit, up from the 0 to 10,000 foot, and let's get it up into the 30,000 foot range at least, okay, and test some methodologies. So rather than trying to drive them to the solution that you want them to have, test ideas, okay? And you say things like, we'd like to share some ideas, and understand how you assess their worth in context of your current needs. Because as soon as you commit to a methodology and it's not going to meet the needs of the customer, if it's not going to deliver the outcome, you're shut down. You're done. So don't test a methodology by saying, we think this is the best solution. How will that do for you? Get feedback on potential methodologies so that you can assess how they feel about things. And some of the ways we do this, and think about what it would be like if you were hiring a decorator or a contractor to do some remodeling in your home. Those of you who know me, and everybody who was with me last week knows I've had some remodeling done on the house lately, and it's been a rather frustrating experience because I know what my ideal contractor looks like, and I haven't found them yet. So if you can say something like, take a look at some of these photographs and tell me what you like and don't like about these solutions, that's a conversation, and that's going to tell us a little bit about what kinds of methodologies and solutions are going to work for this particular customer. And since we're talking about RFP based, in other words, the client's already sent an RFP out, there's things in there that they've already decided are the appropriate methodologies, whether they hired a design consultant to help them to design their operations center or their boardroom setup, or they hired a production manager to design their event, or they're working with a producer, whatever it might be. Are there elements in your RFP that are particularly important or sacred to your traditions or understanding of what's going to work? In other words, does somebody tell you somewhere down the road that you have to have a podium? Or for you grammar Nazis out there, a dais? Okay, does somebody tell you that you have to stand behind an obstacle in order to talk to an audience? Is that a sacred cow? But we can't ask it that way. We can ask them to say, are these particularly important to you or not? What's important on here? What do you think is non-negotiable? Okay. And then later on, we're going to negotiate it, armed with the information that we have. So this is the how conversation. We don't want to finish the how conversation with an agreement about what your solution is going to be, because that doesn't come out until you go through your ideation session and come back. So it's not a good idea to commit to the customer about a how. This is exploratory. We're doing due diligence. We're trying to understand each other and how we work and what works best. You are not married to a solution at this point in time. Now, you may very well be, and I know some of you, You decided what you were going to sell before you ever got the meeting, but we don't have to tell the customer that. Okay? We'll deal with that in the next step. Which brings us to ideation. Oh, good. The grammar Nazis are here. Great. You stand behind a lectern, you stand on a dais or podium. Thank you. Everybody whose rental catalog has podiums on there, please go in there and change it to lectern. That's the correct. All right, ideation. Ideation is the step where we're not with the client anymore. However, you can do this with the client, and I've seen it done very well. Matter of fact, there are certain clients that want to be involved in this session, and so if you've got that transparency and you have the trust and relationship, you can do that. But for the purposes of responding to an RFP with someone we have not done business with before, let's treat this as ideation that we do separately, just amongst ourselves, amongst our diamond, our side of the diamond, okay? This is your solution to the customer's situation. In ideation, we call it the rant, what the customer's rant is. What's the thing that's important to them that they want to solve? And sometimes in their rant, they've told you how they think it needs to be solved, and we need to have a better solution than that, okay? And in fact, the whole purpose of positioning is to change the dialogue in such a way where we are more distinct than anybody else that they talk to, okay? Out of ideation, we're going to come up with compelling options of increasing value. Okay? And options are not just about increasing price, they're increasing value. So we talk more about proposal options in the webinar I cited earlier about proposals. So you got to watch all the webinars. I can't go over everything every single time, but please know that our ideation is going to give them 3 options. The first option meets their basic needs within their budget. The second option adds value on things that they've made it clear is important and has a distinct additional cost, but also additional outcome. And the third thing, the third option is always something that is, we can call it a moonshot idea, but it's something that's over the top. It incorporates something that they may not have even talked about or thought they could accomplish. Then we take our ideation and we turn it into a pitch. Okay? So we're going to take your best ideas to the known and hidden needs, because you've had the positioning conversation. You've learned about a lot of hidden needs because you've been listening carefully. And you found out that, yeah, while they're very sensitive to budget, it's only because they haven't been able to find a good way to present ROI. So if you can provide a better way to present ROI, then maybe you can overcome that budget need. And it's not a manifesto, we have to meet the budget. Okay? We found a better way of doing it. Go back to my example, my story at the beginning of the webinar about my client who took the $300,000 budget and turned it into a $450,000 one because they exceeded the outcome expectations and delivered the client something they didn't know they could have. And apparently nobody else did that or did it well. So in the pitch, we have to satisfy their initial request. We have to engage their imagination about what could be, and we need to get them excited about whatever choice they're going to make. And we don't care which choice they make. And this is very important in the positioning phase and in proposals in general. When you put options in a proposal, you need to be agnostic about which one the client chooses, because there's profit in every single one of them for you. There is the correct profit in every single one. The client simply decides which budget and which fit and finish they want to have. You're happy with any of them. You might be happier if they pick a bigger one if you're a revenue-driven company, but you would rather they pick option 1, which would be the lowest priced option, than choose nothing. Now, in a pitch and a proposal, you build options from the lowest up to the highest. Option 1 is the least expensive. Option 3 is the most. In pitches, you build down. When you go buy a car, they're going to show you the nicest car. They're going to show you a car that you've said you can't afford. Well, at least that's how they sell to me. I always end up buying the car that I can't afford. They're going to sell you the car they can't afford, and they're going to take you down to the car that you can live with. But you're going to be excited about the options in that car because it's going to satisfy you. It's going to engage your imagination because it's going to have features that you didn't know existed that are like the big cars. And if they design their product line well, just like if you design your proposal options well, this is what you're going to get. And then finally, we're going to gather feedback from their reactions from the client, and we're going to incorporate this into the proposal. So we do the pitch, we get the feedback, and they tell us what it is that they like and what they don't like, and where they need to fall into the actual proposal. So I'll pause here for a question. The question is, can you give me an example of ROI for, say, a med added value option in the instance of an event production company, a medium added value option? I'm thinking that's what that means. Okay. An event production company, you have to look at what their outcome is. If the outcome is audience retention because we're educating a sales team about new products, then you demonstrate how your solution has higher retention rates. And the value of higher retention rates is they sell more. Okay, that's an ROI. And that's something that we can effectively do because we are the experts in audience paying attention. Okay, so you have to think a little bit creatively, but if you will go back to what your client has told you about their goals and outcomes, you can ask questions like, so one of the things you said you measure is how much conversation the attendees are having during the coffee break about the presentation before. Yes, absolutely. What in your mind creates the most interesting conversations? And you'll get some feedback on that. Now you can develop the ROI saying, we're going to have more of things that are quantifiable. Say, oh, they love it when we do quantifiable stuff. If we give them numbers, they love to talk about the numbers. Great. We're going to give you ROI. We're going to increase the conversation, but we're going to make the numbers stand out more in how we do the presentation. So that sort of thing. Another question is, the pitch done from salesman to client or team to client environment? Fantastic question. Team. Matter of fact, in an ideation pitch, I generally break it down in 3 groups, and I generally like to have 3 presenters. And as we teach you more about ideation, you'll see how that works. But yeah, definitely something that is a team-based approach. Matter of fact, if you'll eliminate, once you're in positioning, if you'll eliminate the concept of having a lead person on the team, in other words, a spokesperson for the team, and make it a team conversation, that works very well. It doesn't mean that you don't have a salesperson who's still holding the diamond together, but that doesn't mean that they have to be the person in front leading all the conversation. They're not the expert on everything. They're the expert on keeping the diamond together. So another good question. All right, let's see. So your pitch is also going to vary depending on the type of RFP. So just a quick nod here to RFP types. There are 4 basic types in my experience. There are probably some variations on this, but typically I find there are best offer RFPs. In other words, we're sending this out to 12 people. We're looking for the best offer. It doesn't mean the lowest price. It's just the best offer. We want everybody's best offer, and we're going to work from there. Now, we don't always know what the decision-making process is behind a best offer RFP, but that's why we want the positioning conversation. And so my pitch is going to talk about transparency. It's going to talk about who owns the risk and how the client can transfer risk from them to the supplier, but that affects the price. We can talk about how terms affect the price. In other words, it's very much about the business of the transaction and less about the innovation. A moving to the next round RFP is often we'll send it out to 12 people. We're going to take the 3 best and we're going to go deeper with those. In which case, my pitch is really going to be ideas, innovation, customer experience. These are the things I want to focus on in my pitch. Price is not really an important factor here, because if they take the 3 best pitches, that means that the price will be figured out based on what the overall solution is. So don't overly focus on price. It's not to saying that saying something that should cost $200,000 will cost $1 million won't get you knocked out of the top 3, but definitely ideas, innovation, customer experience. Now, spoiler bids or courtesy bids are when the customer already has an incumbent and you're really in the process to validate what the incumbent is going to do. There is an opportunity to be a spoiler, which you've determined by having conversations with the client. Okay. This is part of the qualification process. Is this job winnable? And if your conversation has determined that it is, okay, then you're into the spoiler bid. Good. Take the best offer in the moving to the next round, and you've got to do the whole enchilada. You're going to lead with transparency because most spoiler bids are driven by a relationship issue with the existing supplier. Generally, it's a lack of financial transparency. Somebody is calling them out on their numbers. So lead with transparency. Talk about a risk assignment, but talk about ideas and innovation as well. So you have to go at it with everything and everything that you've learned in the positioning conversation. Now, repeat customers also send you RFPs. And we've all made the mistake of assuming that because it's a regular customer, we've done the show for years, that the RFP is just a formality. And increasingly it is not. Because very often your RFP from a repeat customer is actually a spoiler bid that was sent to someone else. So always assume that if there's an RFP that you're not the only one who got it. If you want to keep customers for life, treat every job like it's the first one. Don't get comfortable. Don't stop sharing ideas. Don't stop having ideation sessions. And work very hard to keep that diamond engaged, and don't let it devolve back into a bow tie relationship. And here's what I see. What I see in your organizations with longtime customers is we went from bow tie to a form of a modified diamond. So we start with a salesman one-to-one. We get the companies working together, and after a year or two or a couple of projects, it now becomes the buyer and the project manager. And it goes back to another kind of bow tie. Okay. We've got to keep the diamond strong and don't let it be broken apart by laziness. So the next step in the positioning process is agreement. We've done the pitch. We've talked about the options. We're having a conceptual agreement to all the things that we just talked about. So we've changed the RFP by presenting something that's a little bit different than what the client originally asked for. And let's talk about those things. Let's be open about them. Let's reaffirm the budgetary parameters and say, so for instance, the client will say, hey, I really, we were looking for this, but you delivered us something different. And we really kind of like that. We're a little concerned about getting it past our executives, and we're a little concerned about budget. At which point it's your business to lose. Okay, if somebody raises 2 minor objections like that, then run with it. Say, what would a validation opportunity look like with your executives? What can we do to make your executives comfortable with this? In other words, we just found out we didn't have the right people in the conversation, or the decision makers aren't actually in the room. So how can we politely get the decision makers into the room? And so what if you've got to do the pitch again? So what if you've got to do the demo again? It's your mistake for not qualifying as carefully as you should have. Or it's simply the process that needed to be followed. Now, assuming that we can come to an agreement and we have our buyers in the room, our decision makers in the room, you can say, okay, you like this part, you don't think you can afford this part, here's the budget range you need to stay within. Okay. If I can get you a proposal by this Friday, can we have a debriefing meeting about it next Wednesday? And it's very important that you get this debriefing or feedback appointment scheduled before you ever send a proposal. And the scheduling of that tells you when the proposal will be delivered by. They say, well, no, we can't. We'd love to have the proposal by Friday, but we can't have that discussion meeting for a couple of weeks. We'll let you know when. And you say, I understand that. I can't do that. What I can do is let's figure out when we can get together to talk about this, and you tell me how much time you need to have that into your hands. I'll give you up to a week. But my team needs to prioritize this, and I need something better than you'll get around to letting me know. Now, you'll find your own language for doing this in a wonderful, thoughtful way, but you need to dig in because this is just business. You now have a good relationship with this client. You've spent a tremendous amount of time together. You're extremely credible. This is not the time to be afraid of your diamond business partner. Say, here's what I can do. So here's an agreement example. Based on our meeting today, we agree that given your goals and the restraints of the venue, that the audience will need additional viewing options, and a solution that fits between this amount and this amount would be ideal for you. However, if we can demonstrate compelling value for some of the innovations we have discussed, you would consider going and ask for additional budget. Is that correct? And this is exactly the kind of conversation my client had with their client in my example at the beginning of the webinar. They got to the conceptual agreement, they knew what the budget range was, and they got permission to do something better if they could demonstrate value, and they did it. That's how this works. And then if you're having trouble getting the feedback, or you may present it this way, and this is often how I present it when I send out proposals. I said, whether you engage me or not, I'd really appreciate your feedback on this process, on the solutions we've offered, and the suitability of our proposal for this project. Could you just give me 15 minutes of your time next week for this, and I'll make sure we have our proposal to you at least 3 days in advance. Hire me or not, but please don't deny me the feedback for all this work I've put into it. And if they won't give you that, you really should wonder why you're trying to do business with them. Now you can actually do a proposal. And remember, there's 3 options in that proposal. Go back and watch that webinar. Now, the service proposal, just a quick review of that webinar. We talked about the whys, the whats, and the hows. Here are the 9 elements of a service proposal. It's the background, it's goals and objectives, measures of success. That's why and what. What? Value to the company is what quantified. That's the ROI. Scope of work and options. That's the how that you wanted to talk about so much. Timeline is how. Mutual accountabilities is just business. Here's our terms and conditions. It's just business. And then the confirmation and next steps tells the customer what is their role in the customer experience now. Your next step is to sign this and return it. Your next step is to acknowledge this, whatever it might be. So the positioning phase is somewhat complex. It will take some practice, but the output is very, very powerful. Now, I've got a little bit more for you in just a minute. I'm going to pause to see if there's more questions, and actually there's a couple here that haven't been answered. And then I've got a couple of positioning tools I want to talk to you about that you can develop for yourself that will come in very handy in positioning conversations. The question I have here, question number 1 is, can you position without a face-to-face meeting? Does it need to be at my office? Because everybody knows that I tell you, get the customer across your threshold into your office, and I know that some of you don't feel that your office would do a good job of representing you. It ideally is a face-to-face meeting. If I can't get them on my office, I want them on my turf, and my turf would be a venue that I control. If all else fails, you can have it at their office, but once you have a meeting at your client's office, you lose all of your power. You lose their attention because they're going to be distracted by other meetings and people sticking their head in and asking questions. You're not going to get the time and attention that you deserve. The meeting is going to be shorter because it's in their office and they're expected to be at other meetings. Get them off-site any way that you can. If geography is a problem, okay, you can do this through electronic meetings. You can do this through some sort of video conference or Zoom or WebEx, but you have to have very compelling content to keep it engaged and keep it lively. Do something with multiple cameras and get lots of individual images on your screen. Make it a more compelling experience. And I got time to answer one more here. What about clients that won't schedule a feedback meeting and say, we will call you? Okay. Well, first of all, that should not happen. If it does, you failed at positioning. So if we have done the positioning conversation and they won't schedule the feedback meeting, okay, you need to find out why. Help me understand why that's not a worthwhile investment in your time. Okay, you need to ask the right questions. So go back to the language of outcomes. Help me understand how not having this conversation gets you to your goals and your outcomes. Okay. And the other thing is that don't use feedback to close. Very often we present this feedback meeting as the close meeting, and we're going to get the customer on there so we can grind them to get them to confirm. Always be closing, right? You got a sales manager that says always be closing. Hit them with a sock full of manure. Do not always be closing. Okay. Closing will happen when closing needs to be happen. Let closing be business. Okay. Get the conversation. Closing will take care of itself, and we'll do another webinar on closing. So I hope that answers that. Now, oh yeah, products. Okay, hey, on my website, on the store, we have the Business Survival Call, Executive Track, Sales and Marketing Track. We talk about this stuff every month in these two groups. We get questions from you. I talk about them at length. So if you really like listening to my voice and you're that twisted, here's a chance to do it for another 1 or 2 hours a month. Check that out. The Jumpstart Live video series. If you're a live event professional, I got over 3 hours of content here. There's 22 videos. It's all my best practices. It's you'll start seeing some of the marketing from the people who were at the workshop last week. I am proud to say this is some good stuff, and you should take a look at it. If you'll just go to the store and just click on the link, you don't have to buy anything, but you'll see, I think the first 3 videos are free and available for you to watch. But more importantly, every video has related links on it. All those related links are live. You can access that content and just look at that. A lot of it's stuff that you might already have seen before, you think you might be able to find, but here it is. It's all codified for you. When was the last time you read the Transactional Thinking Death Spiral blog piece? Well, here it is, and this is the video that it corresponds to. So every video has these. So stop in there, and oh, Christmas present. This was a $497 video series. Okay, use the code POSITION, all caps, 50% off till December 31st. The code will quit working then. Give yourself something to do over the holidays. You can play it while you're cleaning out your office and getting rid of all the old junk and magazines and paperwork and cleaning out your files for next year. You can just play it in the background. It's great stuff. I look forward to hearing what you think about it. All right. Thank my sponsors again. You guys are wonderful. I promised you some tools, tips, and tricks. Here they are. In your positioning meeting, you need a lookbook. Now, this is marketing speak. Okay, this is what marketing people call it, but it's perfect. It's a lookbook. It's full of design and implementation ideas. Guys, it's pictures. It's pictures of jobs that you've done that have design elements in it or implementation elements in it. Here's a 2-screen show in a small ballroom. Here's a 2-screen show in a big ballroom. Here's a conference room for 12 people. Here's a conference room for 30 people. Okay. Give them things to look at so that they can make choices. This is speakers overhead. Here's speakers on the wall. Here's a display at every position. Here's a display on the wall. Give them these options. And here's the pro tip. Give them audience and presenter point of views. If you're selling live events, if you'll put presenter point of views and say, into your lookbook, you say, here's what the presenter is going to see on stage. Here's a 4-monitor downstage monitor configuration with preview and program. Okay. Here's a 1-monitor configuration. Here's a teleprompter screen on the back wall. Here's a teleprompter screen hanging 30 feet in front of the stage. Every time you do something, take the photographs of it so that you can use that as a proof of concept for your customers so that when you're having that meeting, they can go, ooh, I really like that. And then you need to know what it costs. You need to say, well, typically that's going to add about $1,500 to your event. Is that something that we should look at? Oh, yeah, we can afford that. Isn't that cool, Bob? Yeah, that's really cool. Trust me, This will set you apart from everybody else that you're competing against. So it gives you the design parameters. And now let me give you another tip here. The pre-design quote. How many of you have been caught in the paradigm where the client wants you to design something and tell them what it costs just so they can say, well, we don't have that much money? Here's how you fix it. Okay? You give them a pre-design quote. You take the lookbook criteria, you give them 3 design options with fees. We can give you the single screen set with lighted panels. We can design that for you so you know what it looks like in advance for a $1,500 non-refundable fee. The total budgets can be between $40,000 and $50,000 depending on the design. Would you like us to design that for you? Give them the 3 options. They now have to commit to an overall budget. I've finished my positioning conversation because I have parameters, and whatever budget they pick, I go work inside of that budget and then present them 3 options that are built off their total budget. Does that make sense? So these are great tools and tips. And my parting note, it's Friday. I hope you have a great weekend. Monday morning, invite a client or prospect to your office to discuss your next project. Non-negotiable. You need to do this. Use the diamond language to get the right people to the meeting. Here's who I can bring. Here's why I think they need to be there. Who would you bring? Who are the right people for you to bring to this conversation? And then prepare. Get some real innovation to that table and have a better conversation with that prospect. So that's all I've got for today. This wraps up my year for me. This is my final deliverable. So happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and if I don't talk to you before then, Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we'll see you soon.